cafeteria, and all this came down to City Hall. Huge number of immigrants coming through Ellis Island, as well as lots of illegal immigrants coming in on the enormous volume of ship traffic. In fact, that's where most of the mafia came in, was as stokehold men or sailors on the hundreds of ships coming into New York Harbor, not to Ellis Island. Very much a mix of old and new, plenty of Revolutionary War wooden structures left. Not the city that you see today, which is mostly a financial and retail and condo city. No, this was a working city, maybe more similar like Houston in its noise and its bustle and its productivity. So many mixed uses and a lot of tenements walk up, most of which were complete fire traps, certainly down in the Lower East Side. This particular picture on the left is Mulberry Street. And not unusual at all. See how crowded it is, pushcart men, and very much a place that was conducive to crime of Italians on Italians, a group called the Black Hand. And although it wasn't a national organization, extortionists thrived in this atmosphere. Why? Because most of New Yorkers didn't really care what happened to the Italian community, not until Arthur Woods came along, and not on a sustained basis. There were some successful attempts to get control of the mafia and the Black Hand. A fellow named Joseph Petrosino, famous detective known to all New Yorkers, but he was killed in Palermo in 1909, assassinated by the mafia. So, something of a grim picture, but also a city full of life. You might wonder, well, how tough was it? Sort of like some of these comedy routines will say, it was really tough. Somebody says, how tough was it? Well, this is give you a sense of how tough this city was. A group called the Gopher Gang in Hell's Kitchen, this is around 42nd and 4th Avenue, a pretty prosperous area right now. So tough that the leader, called One Lung Karan, he liked to waylay policemen and usually not kill them, but knock them out. And he decided he liked their uniforms. So he started a fashion trend down there at the saloon where they held their meetings. And everybody, all the lieutenants, began waylaying policemen too and wearing their uniforms. And the police could really do nothing about it. They would go in and enforce so that they wouldn't get kidnapped or beaten up. But they couldn't stop One Lung Karan. Then you had the Camorra, another term for the mafia. Polio outbreaks, poliomyelitis, many people passing through, and of course, no vaccination to speak of. Certainly not of, well, that's of course what Franklin Delano Roosevelt suffered from, polio. Overcrowded housing, just ready to burn, and riots, pretty much of every kind. There was a group called a neighborhood called San Juan Hill, notorious for its race riots. And these weren't small either. These were typically a couple thousand people at a time. And the saboteur problem was just beginning to form, but Arthur Woods would have to deal with that too. In June of 1914, Germany sent its first saboteur over to prepare to get to work in New York. His name was Maximilian Wax. So he started plotting and planning. You might wonder, well, where would a guy like that actually do his work and build his bombs? And he did it in New York Harbor. There were 80 German ships stuck in the New York Harbor, and many of which were hotbeds of spying and sabotage. Even though most of the German citizens in America were never involved in it, it just took a few dozen to cause a lot of trouble, and they all operated through the German consulate. So here's all this stuff bubbling, and what are the police going to do about it? Well, in March of 1914, before Woods took over, it didn't look like they were going to do very much. As kids, we played cops and robbers a lot. Well, there was sort of a game in New York, too. You could call it cops and robbers. And that is, who's the cop on your beat, and how much do you need to pay him if you want to have pretty much any kind of a business. And that would include particularly saloons. Well, the police were so wealthy that they would actually loan money to the saloon keepers to set up. Then they would expect a certain amount of money. If you wanted to be a pickpocket, that was about $150 Some street corners are more popular than others. And the money just sort of flowed up, usually all the way to headquarters, but not always. There were certainly some honest police commissioners. One of them was Teddy Roosevelt. But even Teddy Roosevelt couldn't get a grip on this. He was a pretty tough guy. How bad was it as a police commissioner? Well, they went on the average of every 7 months. So that would be about 80 commissioners in 50 years. And as one of the commissioners said, we feel like we're migrating birds. We pass over so quickly, people can't even tell what species we are. And the informers, well, they came and went too. This is where the story begins to change to the good. His name was Herman Rosenthal. He had been a gambler and a saloon keeper on the east side, and that was assumed east side, that was immigrant. But he wanted to move over to the west side and make some more money. So a fellow named Lieutenant Charles Becker set him up, loaned him some money, started taking graft. And eventually Rosenthal said, you're taking too much, you're throwing my nephew in jail, I'm going to tell everyone I can about how corrupt the system is. And this is in 1912. He began talking, the police of course wouldn't listen to him, city council wouldn't listen to him, even newspapers wouldn't listen to him, but the DA would. Began singing, as they say. And he was set up, pulled outside a restaurant and shot on the street by a gang in the pay of the police. And Charles Becker, Lieutenant Charles Becker, was eventually arrested, convicted, and sent to Sing Sing, where he was executed. And 4 other policemen were involved in this. So that helped bring in yet another reform administration. A mayor called John Croy Mitchell, again, not a very famous fellow, and not an easy one to deal with either. Pretty elitist, prone to terrible migraine headaches, but a very hardworking fellow and liked to get a grip on as many facts as he could. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Jimmy Carter. Not a very warm person necessarily, but wanted to work hard and wanted to do a good job. One of the things he had to do in his job was to appoint the police department commissioner. 2 of them turned him down. One of them was General Goethals, who had been involved with the Panama Canal, something of a hero. So he still needs to pick a police commissioner. This is April 1914. And he turns to his private secretary, a fellow named Arthur Woods. And just on this particular slide, you're thinking, this is not looking good. A school teacher, his private secretary, well-to-do family out of Boston. He's going into the toughest environment in the world. This is not looking good. But there are a few more facts to it. He was more than what we might call a do-gooder. Age 44, about 6 feet tall, lean and tough, and very curious and very energetic, and a good listener. He had been a teacher at the Groton School, and Groton School, it's easy to write off as yet another one of those private schools, still exists in the East, sending people to Yale and Harvard. But it wasn't your standard school, not like we think of today. It was run by a Reverend Endicott Peabody, who insisted that the richer you were, the harder you should work. And they called it the problem of the vicious rich. So when you went to Groton, as a young man, it didn't matter how wealthy you were, you had cold showers and cold rooms, and you got up early and you played football. Peabody loved football. He said it's the most spiritual of all endeavors. Because he said if you play football, then you get up early and you eat plain food. That was the atmosphere that Arthur Woods fit into. And one of his pupils was a young man named Franklin Delano Roosevelt.